Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Born from Sin. I'm your host, Danielle. This week's episode is going to be about my mom. It's mainly going to be about mental health issues, specifically schizophrenia. I grew up with a mother that was schizophrenic my entire life. Mom was born October the 18th, 1948, and at the age of 5, she was adopted by a family out in Cocaine, New Brunswick. She lived out most of her life there until the age of 13 when she accidentally ended up killing her father. From there, mom had been taken away and put into like a juvenile jail where she was raped by one of the guards that was there. She ended up getting pregnant with a son and was forced to marry this man. She lived with him for a few years, and it became to a point where she felt that she did not want to be in this relationship anymore. This man was extremely controlling and abusive towards her, and she wanted out. The only way that she could get out was for her to give up full rights of her son and hand them over to the father. So she did that. Then she made her way out to Montreal, where she ended up meeting up with my dad, and then her horror just continued from there. She ended up getting pregnant with a daughter, and at the age of 9 months, this daughter was given up. Shortly after that, she got pregnant with twin boys. One night during a drunken rage, my dad would have kicked my mom in the stomach while she was pregnant, causing her to fall down the stairs. One of the babies ended up dying. She ended up having to carry both of these babies to full term. One of the babies ended up being stillborn, and the other one survived a few months because of a brain clot in his head. He ended up dying. Then I was born. And as you know, my mom and I both went through a lot of hell living with my father, and him, being there, being gone, sexually abusing me, physically and mentally abusing me, physically and mentally abusing my mom, and the man was just horrific. The age of 11, when we were waiting to go to court, I was getting off the school bus. I was on my way home. After the school bus left, I could hear this engine like revving behind me, and I turned around to go check out what the noise was. Here comes my dad barreling down the street at me with his truck, windows down, and the song "I Want to Know What Love Is" by Foreigner playing full blast. I jumped off the road onto the sidewalk, rolled onto the grass to avoid him running me over, got up, brushed myself off, crying, walking into the apartment expecting to see my mom. My mom's not there. So now not only am I sad and confused because I had no idea where my mom is, because it was very unusual for my mom not to be there when I got home. She was either making a after school snack or getting dinner ready. She was always around. So as I put my book bag down, I can hear this really loud music. I'm thinking at first that it's my dad still sitting outside, but it wasn't. I opened up my mom's bedroom door, and the song "Lord, I Hope This Day Is Good" by Don Williams is playing on repeat. My mom's laying face down on her bed. I had no idea what was going on. I just thought she was sleeping. So I walk up to her and I'm like, "Mom, I'm home. Mom, 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 I'm home. Mom." And I start shaking her, and she's not waking up. And all of a sudden she rolls over, and I see these empty pill bottles. I knew right away that something wasn't right. I left the apartment. I ran upstairs and I went to go grab our neighbor, Bill. And Bill came downstairs and ended up calling 911. And they took mom away in an ambulance and took me along with her. That was my first of many suicidal experiences with my mom. These suicidal experiences went on for years, right until I was like in my 30s. My mom, when she was on her medication, was fantastic. She was not abusive. She was very caring. She was always interested in how my day was. She was good with helping me with my homework. She always had dinner on the table. She was a good mom when she was on her medication. But when she wasn't on her medication, that was a completely different story altogether. I remember waking up in the middle of the night. I was about 13 years old, and I could hear my mom yelling and screaming, and it sounded like she was yelling and screaming at my dad. And it was like, what the heck is going on? So I open up my bedroom door and I start walking down the small hallway, and I can see this, like, the shadow, like, and I was trying to figure out what the heck was going on. So I cautiously moved my way towards the living room door, and there's my mom standing there with a butcher knife in her hand, stabbing a chair with nobody in it. She is literally screaming and yelling at my father, stabbing this chair with nobody in it. And I think that was my first realization that there was something just not quite right with my mom. And I learned to tread very lightly because I just never knew what to expect from her when she wasn't on her medication. I remember I was in my 20s and my mom had attempted suicide. They released her from the hospital and she had nowhere to go. She had lost her apartment because she had gone to the hospital and she was in there for a few months. So she came and stayed with me and my girls. My youngest daughter was very asthmatic at the time. She was having a rough day. I decided that the three of us would camp out in her room that night. That the girls had a share room and they had a bunk bed. TV's on in the bedroom and we're all just cuddled up underneath a blanket watching TV. I fall asleep. All of a sudden, it's about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I could feel somebody staring at me, and it was like just this eerie feeling. I woke up, and there's my mom standing over me and my two girls with a butcher knife in her hand, and I didn't know what to do. All I could think about was her stabbing that chair when I was 13 years old with nobody in it. My children were laying right there in the bed. I had to think quickly, think smart without startling her so that she wouldn't lunge at me and my children. I quietly, because I didn't want the children to wake up and see their grandmother standing there with a butcher knife over them. And I just very quietly and softly just went, Mom, put the knife down. We're okay. Dad's not here anymore. We're okay. And I have zero explanation for it, but she walked over to the dresser, the knife down, walked out of the room, went to her bedroom, and went back to sleep. And that was the moment that I decided that I was going to send my children to go live with their dad because I was not going to endanger them any more than they had already been. My mom's schizophrenia went from, you know, bad to worse. After, trying to commit suicide so many times, she was living in a place where her landlord was her caregiver. I couldn't keep her at home anymore. There was no way of me being able to take care of her and keep myself and my children safe. So she ended up living with this lady that ended up being her caregiver. One day, the caregiver, called me and said that mom was really sick. At this point in time, thankfully, she was on her medication. She wasn't suicidal, but she had gotten extremely sick and ended up with pneumonia. And they ended up bringing her to the hospital from that point on because of her not being able to properly take care of herself. She just stopped caring about her hygiene. This is something that the caregiver obviously wasn't prepared for, and none of us were. So when she got to the hospital, we had made the decision that it was a good idea for her to, go into a nursing home full time. Thankfully, from then on, she didn't try to commit suicide again. Her schizophrenia over the years while she was living at the hospital grew. She had good days and bad days. It got to a point where I needed to distance myself from her on her bad days. After my husband's accident had been settled, we had bought a house just around the corner from the nursing home that one was living in. I made an effort to go up there every single day. I would pack a lunch and we would have lunch together, or if I couldn't make it up at lunchtime, we would go up at dinner time. And everything was going really well. One day, the psychiatrist decided that he wanted to sit down and have a meeting to talk about my mom's health care. All right, so we make the appointment and we go in and we're sitting there and there's my mom, who at this point in time is wheelchair bound, and she has been wheelchair bound for probably about 2 years at this point. So there's the psychiatrist, his assistant, myself, my husband, and my mom. As we're sitting there having a conversation about my mom, and we're talking her through what's going on and why we're all having this meeting, and so my mom's demeanor started to change. And it started to change when I started talking about some of the abuse that she went through with my dad, the stuff that I actually knew about. She had been raped as a child and was forced to marry a man, and told them the whole story. As we're sitting there having this conversation with the doctor, my mom's face changed. You can tell when there's something not right. My mom had a few different personalities, and one of the voices that was in her head, according to her, was my dad. And we all know, how much of a violent man my dad was. When he was talking to her in her schizophrenic mind, he would tell her things like, I was the issue and that I had to be taken care of. I had to be killed. Otherwise, I was going to tell their dirty little secret. We're sitting there and we're having a conversation with the doctor. And all of a sudden, her demeanor starts to change, shifting herself around in her wheelchair, almost like she wants to stand. We continue talking, but we're keeping an eye on her at the same time. Then her face just changed completely. Normally, when she was her face was very droopy, very sad. When she smiled, she could light up the room. But on a very regular basis, her face was very droopy, very sad. All of a sudden, her face was not so droopy. Her eyes had changed. It was the craziest thing. We all witnessed something that we never could have anticipated. My mom put both of her hands on either side of her wheelchair on the armrest, lifted herself up, and leapt at me. She flew out of her wheelchair and leapt at me. And the doctor was freaked out. The nurse was freaking out. My husband was like, was shit, like, what the hell? Like, so they finally pick her up off me and put her back in a wheelchair, and she was fine. It's stuff like this that I experienced with my mom being schizophrenic. I never knew from one minute to the next what to expect from this woman. For years as a child, I thought that without knowing that she was schizophrenic, I thought that if I listened more, or I did the chores that I was asked to do, or if I helped out more like I was asked to do, that my mom wouldn't be trying to kill herself, that my mom would actually want to stick around and be my mom. I couldn't figure out for the life of me that my mom hated so much that she thought it would be better for her to be dead than to watch me grow up, watch me get married, watch me have children, get a career, be a part of that. All I wanted to do was die. It took me years to figure out through different counseling sessions and with the help of a high school teacher to understand that my mom's schizophrenia had nothing to do with what I was or wasn't doing. It was a mental illness that she had. And because of this mental illness, she couldn't handle the bad things that these voices in her head were saying to her. And she would try to kill herself to quiet those voices, not because she didn't want to be my mom. I lived for years with a disease that wasn't mine. I grew up listening to stories that I come to find out later on completely weren't true. When I found out in 2018 that my parents were biological brother and sister, I started to unfold a little bit more information about my mom. I found out that she never killed her father at the age of 13. She never went away to jail. She was never raped by a guard. She was never pregnant and forced to have this child. What happened was her adopted father did die of a heart attack. She ended up finishing high school. She actually attended the school in Cocaine, which was like literally pretty much in their backyard. She graduated. She became valedictorian. She was very smart. Somewhere along the way, she ended up out in Montreal and met my dad. They did have a daughter. Um, who ended up later on finding my mom and I. It's another story all on its own that I'll share with you one day. These twin boys she claimed to be pregnant with, she wasn't. So that whole being kicked down the stairs, being pregnant, being forced to have a stillborn child, and then one dying 3 months later, it's not true. I went around for years searching for a brother that never existed. My mom's schizophrenic reality, that continues story, that her son, Sean, had grown up and gone off to college, and he became a veterinarian. And he lived in the Montreal area. Back in the day, there was no internet, so it wasn't very easy to find people. But I remember going to the libraries and looking up phone books and seeing if I could track down Sean O'Casey, which is what his name was supposed to be, this veterinarian that worked out of Montreal. Think he'd be easy to find? Not whatsoever. That's because he didn't exist. I had given up on the fact that I had a sister out there, and because for years, um, my dad told me and my mom told me that my sister had died of cancer. I wasn't really out searching for someone because I was under the assumption that she had passed away. It wasn't until years later when I found out about my brother not being true that I had found out that my sister was actually still alive. When I came out to New Brunswick in 2018, when I found our family, came up for a visit, I ended up meeting up with one of my cousins, and he was the only cousin that I had from my mom's adopted family. Everybody from that side of the family pretty much at that point in time had passed away except for one sister, my mom, and then my cousin. For years, I thought that my cousin had passed away. At the age of 17, my mom had told me that my cousin had gotten married and that he came home one day and his wife had been cheating on him and he couldn't take it and he ended up hanging himself. For a few years, that one hit me hard because although I didn't have a lot of time with him growing up as a child, the times that we did have were special to me. And it really blew my mind because I thought that someday I was going to be able to see him again. At the age of 17, I was told that he had hung himself. So imagine my surprise when I find the family only to find out that he's alive. Do you even understand how difficult it is to sit down and have a conversation with someone that to you is a ghost? It took me everything to sit there and try not to freak out every single time that we went for coffee or had dinner at their place or his wife came over here for a visit. By the way, his wife never cheated on him. And it was heartbreaking because in May of this year, that cousin ended up passing away from a total freak accident at home. And I never got the opportunity to build up that bond with him again. All because I could not process in my mind how I could be sitting there talking to a ghost. And I knew that it was because of my mom's schizophrenic story that she told me in the past that it wasn't true, but it was very, very, very hard for me to process. So when he died in May, it hit me hard. It still does. And then a month later, mom died. And that's when the stories finally stopped. That's when I finally got to free myself of her schizophrenic reality. I can't tell you how difficult it is to sit there and watch someone suffer with that kind of a disease. It's very heartbreaking. It's very confusing, and it's still to this day is frustrating. I lost so many years with so many people that I could have still been in their lives, like my grandparent, like my grandmother, who was good to me, the one that adopted my my mom. I would have had the opportunity had it not been for my mother's schizophrenic stories and her telling me that my grandmother was also dead, that had died in a car accident. If it had not been for my mom's schizophrenic stories, I would have been able to introduce my children to their grandmother. She would have loved them. I would have been able to introduce my children to one of my mom's best friends. And you know what? She would love my girls too. But unfortunately, that's something that'll never happen, and that's okay. And one of these days, I'll heal past that as well. But it's been hard. I think the hardest part about mom being gone isn't even the schizophrenia. It's the fact that I'll never be able to just talk to her again. The fact I'll never be able to see her again or hug her again. And the fact that for about a year before she passed away, I started to distance myself from her because her schizophrenia and her dementia were getting to a point where it was becoming extremely abusive, verbally abusive, and I just couldn't take it anymore. I used to call her every other day to check in on her, to let her know that yeah, we're still in the process of trying to bring you out here, because that was the plan. We had moved out to New Brunswick and we were going to bring mom home. Her work was all in order, and then COVID happened and shut the whole world down, so that never happened. And of course, yeah, I got blamed for COVID. I created COVID. I did that on purpose to shut the whole world down so that I would not have to deal with her anymore, that I would not have to live up to the promise of moving her out here to New Brunswick like I had said I would do. When mom passed away, I was hurt. I cried. And although I thought it was going to hit me, I knew it wasn't going to hit me as hard as if it was the first time that she had died. Growing up with someone that was suicidal my entire life, I watched that woman die a lot. When I got the call from the doctor on June the 11th at like 2:45 in the morning that my mom had finally taken her last breath, I cried. And for that whole day, I did a whole lot of crying. I was in shock, but then I wasn't in shock. I was sad, but I felt free. And I felt guilty about feeling free. Not sad, yeah. For a couple of days, I bounced back and forth with this whole guilt of distancing myself from her before she passed away. Not being able to take the schizophrenic verbal abuse that I was taking. And I stopped calling every other day, and it went to every weekend to every other weekend, to a point where I just kind of stopped calling, and then she died. When I received her ashes, I thought for sure that that was going to be my breaking point. Thought for sure that that's when it was all going to come flooding back to me. And mailman showed up with mom's ashes, and I brought them inside, put them down, put the ashes, her home, apologized for not being how we wanted to get her there, but that she was home. I was at peace. It took me until about last month when I stopped feeling guilty for being free of her schizophrenia. I stopped feeling guilty for not having to be there to take care of her anymore. I stopped feeling guilty for realizing that I had the freedom to fully live my life now. Because for years, all I did was take care of my mom. I mothered my mom. She made me promise things that no one should ever put onto their child. I tried my best to live up to those schizophrenic expectations, and I failed. And then I realized that, you know what? That's okay. I'm better off now. I have healed through my past, through the trauma that we went through with my dad. And now I am finally free to heal fully from the reality of my mom. I can't tell you how confusing it is. It's very hard to sort out in my mind some days where to put myself at. I'm very sad that she's gone. I'll always be sad that she's gone. I love my mom. I really do. But also very happy, although I'm crying, I'm also very happy not have to be lunged at ever again, not to have to worry about her standing over us with a knife, not knowing whether or not I was going to survive another night with my mom living with me. But I think the thing that brings me the most peace, and probably the reason why it doesn't hurt as much as I thought it would, is because all I've ever wanted was for my mom's mind to stop hurting her. I just wanted her mind to be quiet so that she could be free of the voices, not to have to hear awful things that these voices were telling her. I can't imagine what it must have been like inside her mind. It always bothered me knowing how hard she was suffering mentally. It brings me so much peace now knowing that she's no longer struggling with voices. She's no longer struggling with dementia. It started to quiet her schizophrenic mind, which was good. But there were some of those voices that it just couldn't completely quiet for her. And now that she's no longer with us, she can finally be free of the torture that she lived all these years inside her own mind. And that's the show for today. I will see you next week.